Ring!
Oh no,
Not again. I know better than pushing that dumb snooze button. This is the third morning in a row I haven't got out of bed till 6:45. I know that I feel so much better if I get up at 6:30 and read my Bible. Well, so much for that. I guess I had better run through the shower.
I had no clean clothes and the fridge was next to bare. And both of these were not even my fault. Nothing is my fault because I'm a very upscale, on top of everything type of a person. So we'll start with a clothes catastrophe. If I wouldn't have to share a washer with Marvin and Jen, I'd probably be wearing my cute Hollister hoodie from my BFF, my scarf from Claire's, and my favorite tealish blue socks from Abercrombie. But bless their hearts, they use that washer constantly. Not just a few hours a day. They use it all the time. Imagine how it is trying to talk to someone who never, ever, ever shuts up. That's how I feel about the washer. I can't get a load of laundry in edgewise. So that's why I have no clean clothes, and probably why you can also smell these from where you're sitting. The fridge is another story. Don't take this wrong and think that it's my fault. It's true that the fridge is bare because I've eaten all the food, but listen as I explain. The reason it's not my fault is because I'm a stress eater. The reason I'm stressed is because of all the homework I have. So in reality, it's my teacher's fault that my fridge is bare and that I have nothing to eat. Until they lighten up the workload, I'll continue to waste away like a grape turning into a raisin.
I sprinted out the back door, slamming it behind me. As I careened around the corner, my shoes gave way to a combination of centrifugal force and a lack of friction on the muddy side. I sprang up from the ground, brushed the mud from my sport coat, and fumbled in my pocket for the car keys. I depressed a button on the key fob. With a chirp, the door unlocked. I tossed my portfolio onto the back seat and slid into the front. My corduroys squeaked on the leather seats. I twisted the key in the ignition. A big Mercedes-Benz rumbled to life, its twin exhaust spewing vapor into the crisp morning air. With the heat on full blast, I jerked the transmission into gear. The tires squealed as the leaves on the pavement gave way to their powerful thrust. The car lurched out of the driveway and rounded a sharp curve, effectively distributing papers all over the floor of my speeding sedan. I screeched to a halt at a stop sign, glanced quickly both ways, and zoomed across the intersection. As I headed through town, my whirling mind reeled at the horrendous price of gas. $5.59 a gallon! How ridiculous! My thoughts continued on a depressing strain as I emerged from the other side of town. Within 3 minutes, I had motored the 5 miles to the freeway. As I accelerated up the ramp, I observed a long string of vehicles crowding the highway. How would I ever make it to work on time? My feeble mind attempted to comprehend why anyone else would want to go to work at the exact time I did. Slowly, we crept along. Now I understood why someone had made the joke which stated that the only way to get anywhere on these highways was to buy the car in front of you. I had to admit it wasn't true, but this traffic jam sure wasn't helping my already rotten day. Finally, after what seemed like half an eternity, which, by the way, is the same as an eternity, I spotted my exit. Just as I activated my turning signal and was preparing to merge onto the deceleration lane, the unthinkable occurred.
I was driving along very innocently, and suddenly, a blue Malibu swerved into the lane right in front of me. I slammed on my brakes, slid off the road, and stopped just short, 10 feet short of the biggest cliff you have ever seen in your life. My Mercedes almost didn't get stopped.
As I pulled my shuddering Ford off the highway and into the spacious parking area surrounding the American Chronicle, I breathed a huge sigh of relief. Carefully peeled my right hand off the steering wheel, reached down and turned off the engine. My trusty car gave one final hacking cough, and then it was still. The peaceful silence settled over me like a soothing blanket. After several minutes, my heart returned to its normal pattern, and I lifted my head from the steering wheel. I unbuckled and opened the car door. As I stood up, a cool sensation settled down my right leg. So that's where the rest of my coffee had ended up. Oh well, I'm awake now, I sighed and began sorting through the clutter of papers scattered in the back seat. I picked up those that looked most important and stuffed them back into my upturned briefcase. As I trudged across the well-marked lot, I noticed the new Jaguar in spot 813. Not again, I murmured. How could she tire that Corvette in less than 3 weeks? I glanced back once more as I entered the revolving doors. The shining red Jaguar only accented the rust of my '79 Pinto 3 rows back. To my utter chagrin, a small white paper centered carefully on the elevator door read, "Out of order. Sorry for any inconvenience." I sighed again, then wearily began the long trek up 8 flights of stairs. As I started up the final flight, I heard the familiar ding of the elevator. I rushed the final steps and turned quickly to the left. Down the hall, the elevator door was closing again, as was the door to room 813. How convenient, I growled. The elevator seems to be working just fine when she wants to use it. I glared balefully at her door again, then turned around and headed down the long hall toward my little sanctuary, room 827. I was startled to find the door unlocked, and even more surprised to find the lights on. I rushed to my computer. It was on as well. What could this mean? Who had broken into my room? Then I noticed the small white paper centered carefully on my mahogany desk. The handwriting was all too familiar. The note wasn't addressed or signed, but it didn't need to be. Come to room 813, please. I'd like to meet with you.
I strode down the hall and waited outside the door for what seemed like an eternity. Waiting. I could feel a beard sprouting on my face and growing down until it tickled my neck. In the office behind me, it was as quiet as death. No papers rustling, no phone conversation. My insatiable curiosity got the best of me. What could be the holdup? It was not like Mrs. Shrine to keep a person waiting for no reason. I got down on my knees and peeked through the crack beneath the office door. I could just make out the intricately carved feet of my boss's desk. The wheels of her plush red office chair across the floor. But when the sliver of feet came into my view, it was Rocky Mountain Outfitter boots. A style, for some reason, I knew did not belong to Mrs. Shrine. Wait, clipping across the floor came those stiletto heels I knew so well. So, is it taken care? I heard the cleaning lady coming down the hall. She was heading my direction. I got up and ran and sat down on a chair behind the water cooler. The maid went tripping by. "Morning, ma'am," I said, sheepishly, in as dignified a face as I could muster. She just raised an eyebrow at me and continued on her way, not even missing a moment of her song. As soon as she disappeared, I scanned the room desperately. I had to figure out what was going on behind those doors. Some mischief was surely afoot. There was a glass standing beside the water cooler. I plucked it up and tiptoed across the room. Stealthily, I laid it against the wooden door. Was that a man's voice I heard? "Mrs. Shrine, I really don't think." "Nonsense! Just step inside the closet. This will only take a minute." The folding closet doors creaked closed. I heard the clip of Mrs. Shrine's shoes coming towards the door. I spun on my ear and plastered a look of boredom onto my face, stuffing the glass into the plastic branches of a potted plant behind me. The door swung open. "Please come in, Mr. Lottie."
I stiffly slid through the opening and crouched down on the glider rocker in front of my boss's desk. I set my hands firmly on my knees to keep them from knocking and breathed deeply. As I sat, the secretary watched me suspiciously over her top rims of her glasses. I squirmed as I contemplated all the reasons my boss may want me. Looking at the positive side, I figured she may wish to give me a raise. The sales certainly had risen since my suggestion of painting the men's restroom royal gray. But then again, it had been my fault when the wrong color had come at first. So the lunchroom got painted volcano red. And why, oh why did I put that plastic pitcher of apple cider into the microwave? Besides the fact that I wanted hot apple cider. Sometime during the 15 minutes of being in the micro, the plastic formed a pool of goo inside, and the apple cider leaked out. And besides being a gorgeous mess, it was the same time that the inspector from the LCC Lunchroom Cleanliness Co-op came. Recalling the precious memories, my hands started to sweat and shake.
She leaned forward in her chair, a slight smirk on her face as her fingers drove to the desk. Late again was more of a statement rather than a question. Her gaze was fixed, her eyes bore holes through me, crumbling any self-confidence I may have been feeling. I coughed nervously. She slowly slid a thin envelope across the desk toward me. My hand trembled as I reached for it. I tried to swallow it, but my mouth was dry.
I grabbed the envelope hoping it was a birthday card or a trip to the Bahamas. But something about it reminded me of the time I got a stupid speeding ticket for going 75 and a 35. As Shelley fixed her serious attention on the object of her condemnation, I suddenly felt like an innocent rodent between the paws of a famished feline. The pregnant pause that followed birthed only a nervous clearing of the throat on her part. The air was still except for the soft whine of her computer. I sat, waiting like a criminal for my conviction. "Robert," she said at length, "it has come to my attention that the tempo of the fabrication of our prized Oster vacuum cleaners has in the past 84 days fallen from 10,000 units per week to 9,000 units per week. Under your surveillance and governance, in an endeavor to eliminate production inefficiencies from our noble establishment, it has been determined that you, Robert, and your efficiencies are the solitary originator of this quandary. Be it officially known that the services of Robert Higgins, Jr. are no longer useful at Oster International, and his employment has been officially terminated." What in the world did that mean, I wondered. She must have noticed this confusion on my face. Again she spoke. "It is imperative that your cubicle be desolated of your physical possessions prior to the center of these 24 hours. Something about the poison in her sweet voice and the daggers in her icy eyes suggested I should be leaving about now. I looked again at the envelope and noticed the words, "termination of employment." The words stumbled out. "So, I'm fired?" I stammered. It all seemed like a bad dream. "My answer is in the affirmative," was her frosty reply. I turned to go, my thoughts swirling like a whirlwind. "You are at liberty to pursue an alternative vocation," were the last words I heard before the solid oak door clicked softly behind me. As I stumbled past the waiting room, I glanced over to see a young, well-dressed businessman reading the Wall Street Journal. "You're next," I thought with a grimace.
I got my belongings from the desk and left. I couldn't believe it. All my dreams of ever becoming successful in the business world were crushed. Why did it all end like this? I thought. Was it not just a little over 2 months ago, or maybe closer to 3, that I was honorably promoted to the position of trusted advisor to my boss's assistant manager? and with my boss's approval. Although these thoughts were spinning through my head, I thought it was best for her to dismiss me. With these thoughts running through my mind, I managed to find my brand spanking new Ford Focus car. I jumped in and slammed the door with a loud bang. I just wanted to cry, but kept it under control for fear that onlookers would think that I was going to have a nervous breakdown. I was in a big hurry to get home. I turned on the ignition and in my frustration stepped on the gas while forgetting I still had my emergency brake on. This only added to the emotional climax of humiliation. I jerked the emergency brake to off and tried again. I surprised myself when I heard tires squealing beneath my car as I hauled out of the parking lot. Truly, this day couldn't get much worse. As I drove the 20 minutes to the interstate of downtown Chicago, I became convicted about my attitude about the whole situation. I knew my life was in shambles and that it must change for the better, because I wasn't a Christian yet. Right then and there, I pulled off the interstate and into a Target parking lot. After parking my car, I cried to God, asking Him to forgive me for my selfish way of living. I had a Bible in the car that I had been reading for quite some time, but now it grabbed my attention and I got the urge to follow through with inviting Jesus into my heart and committing my life to walk in His ways by following the instructions in the back of the Bible. God drastically changed my heart right there and in the parking lot, and I could sense a peace that I never felt before. I knew that God answered my prayer. I pulled back onto the interstate and turned on the radio. I flipped to a station that I didn't listen to very much. A preacher was giving a message. He said, "This world is not our home, we're just passing through. Heaven is our real home." I responded, "I would like to go there someday." At this time, I turned onto Skyline Boulevard in downtown Chicago, where I met with a large traffic jam that moved a few feet every 15 minutes. I came to a complete stop. All at once, crash! And my trip home was truly a fast one. I made clear. I continued with a chuckle. God did not delay to bring me home, and now I am here. The Apostle Peter replied, "I have heard many interesting stories of how people come home to heaven, but yours is out of the ordinary. What did Jesus tell you?" I answered Pete. "He welcomed me home and said, 'Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord.' This means I am now unemployed with the promise of being ruler over many things. I am a blessed man, Peter."